Okay, thank you everybody. Welcome to the Higher Business Series. I'm Kylie Ingram from Wiser, and today I am joined by Troy Roderick, one of Australia's most respected voices in diversity, equity and inclusion, and somebody who has spent decades doing the work where it matters inside real organisations with real constraints and real performance expectations. Troy was a creator of Telstra's pioneering All Roles Flex module, and he has twice been nominated in the Global Diversity List Top 50 and recipient of multiple international awards. Troy now partners with executive teams across 5 continents, focusing on productivity, performance, and long-term value creation. This is not a session about adding another initiative or giving leaders another problem to carry. It's a practical design on how work gets done, how work gets made, and how teams collaborate. And we're going to talk about all of these things through a productivity lens. Troy is going to show you how inclusion design can free up executive time, reduce friction in teams, and improve business performance. Troy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kylie. Great to be here. And hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
It is, and we're excited to talk about productivity as Wiser because I think when we're designing decision rooms, people will go, oh, that'll take more time. And it's, it doesn't take more time. You actually end up with better outcomes in the same time. So it's so exciting to have you here to chat away about productivity, which is on everybody's mind in the age of AI, isn't it?
Well, indeed. I mean, not only from a macroeconomic perspective, I mean, I think all countries are looking for ways to lift productivity, but then you've got that collision, almost a collision of tools that will help boost productivity and the human aspects of, butting up against that, really. And lots of concern about what new tools will change in terms of people's employment prospects, abilities to advance in organisations, all of the things that that we have now. I think it's interesting, though, if we're talking about inclusion and productivity, to look at what we actually mean by inclusion.
Yes, exactly.
And what it means in high-performing places. So a little definition that I like to use that I think is easy to remember is diversity is a fact. So diversity exists. As soon as you get 2 or more people together, you've got difference. And inclusion is a choice. So inclusion only exists when we do it, when we decide to take action to make inclusion happen, right? So another way to remember it, which I think is cute because it rhymes. Diversity is a fact and inclusion is an act, if that's easier for you. But to frame up what we mean, inclusion therefore has 3 aspects to it. The first one we're looking at is experiences of belonging. So fitting in, really, people being able to fit into whatever situation they find themselves in, side by side with one's uniqueness being valued, which is, side by side with fitting in, is standing out. So people want to be able to stand out and be valued for who they are in all of the aspects of their difference or uniqueness. And third of all, we want to see belonging, uniqueness, and psychological safety. So we only have inclusion when we see all 3 of those things. And that essentially is about being able to take social risks. And of course, many of the ways that we're working now, we're going to talk about flex and hybrid today, introduce different models or different aspects of psychological safety, or not, as the case may be.
Yeah, no, that's incredibly important. And I love your rhymes. You can bring more of them along today.
Love rhymes.
Yes. And you've said good people practices productivity strategies. What do you want to talk, touch on that a bit more? Or?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And I mean, this is the thinking that I've been doing and the work I've been doing since coming back to Australia, and that is essentially that good people practices are not separate, right, from productivity or business problems or business issues. They actually are the work. So what I mean by the good practices, and these go to some areas of experience and current research that I'm doing, inclusion, so the act of the 3 aspects that I just mentioned, Flexible and hybrid work, which itself is an inclusion initiative, because it's all about personalising the experience of work, and addressing how power is held, used and shared in organisations. So what I've been doing is testing 3 hypotheses, and that is that doing these things contributes to performance and productivity, and gathering loads of evidence for these 3 propositions, that they improve performance and productivity in teams at the team level, the organisational level, and therefore in economies and in nations. And it's a bit of a flip for how we might usually talk about diversity and inclusion initiatives. We sort of somehow try to shoehorn them into a business case or a fairly flimsy piece of research that correlates one thing with another. But what I'm trying to do is show that when we do inclusion, when we do flexible and hybrid work, when we address how power is held, used and shared, we see that they have a positive impact. Doing these things has a positive impact on performance and productivity. So the key aspect of this, of course, is that people are at the center, and that is all people. So not as generic units of production, or machines as we used to have them operating in the 9 to 5 days of the early industrial revolution, but as beings, right, with judgment and all abilities, emotional intelligence, agility, capacity for change and ambiguity. That's what people bring. So most places, I think, still treat people practices like particularly things like inclusion or wellbeing or psych safety as separate from the real work of being productive and high performing. They just sit in HR, and we sometimes do comms about them. So inclusion itself actually reduces the hidden tax on performance, which exists if we don't take people into account. And we all know about examples of when people edit themselves in workplaces or in meetings before speaking, or every time someone doesn't share a great idea because of who else is in the room, or someone who's very talented decides to stop trying. That's actually a productivity loss, and is actually a symptom of inclusion not occurring in your workplace.
Yeah, you can see it once they've checked out. Isn't that almost like the last thing that happens? Like they'll try, often they'll try, and then once they check out, you've really lost them at that point, haven't you?
Yeah, so it's probably been going on for months and months, right, already. And that's, I think we're going to talk about what to look out for in this regard.
And so, do you think that, like you're kind of talking about the mistakes, is there anything else that's, that the common mistakes when they're thinking about the DEI, or what do you see, as inclusion?
Yes.
What's
lots of mistakes. I don't want to be like the person who's coming in with all the nasty feedback, but there are a few, and perhaps we've experienced a bit of a reckoning in DEI world in the last, what is it? How long has it been? 18 months now. DEI is dead. Long live DEI is kind of what we're all saying at the beginning of last year. But this to me was a bit of a useful reckoning, notwithstanding that, of course, I don't support anything that the current US administration is doing or saying. But I thought it was interesting that they gave us the opportunity to rethink what good DEI looks like. And I think that diversity, equity and inclusion work that is framed as giving business leaders another problem to solve is actually, on the fast track to being ignored, sidelined, under-resourced. We might genuinely think that the causes or issues we're focused on, particularly if we're taking an activist angle or a heavily social justice angle, are worthy. And of course they are. There's lots of good reasons as to why they're worthy. But framing them as new problems doesn't really get us the resources or time or attention or real support that we need to do the work. And of course, that's not a great place to start. So I think that we need to use DEI to solve the problems that business leaders already have and that they need to solve. So, which is why I keep coming back to performance and productivity, because they are core to the problems that businesses have to solve, and they're very common, particularly when we're in resource constrained and now increasingly very uncertain times. Like, people are not okay. It's a very uncertain time out there. And so we've got to focus on the things that business leaders are worried about and not give them more things to more problems. I have a client, and she was talking to me about some big new deals that they had won in this organization. Great success, lots of money coming in from the new deals. That would actually help with the future growth and stability of the organization. But the dilemma was that there's a bit of a squeeze on recruitment, like a current squeeze on recruitment. That would mean we'd have to do more with the current capacity that's available in the organization. Like, that's a real business problem. We've got the new things, but we don't have the ability to boost our capacity. So we used inclusion and flexibility to create the conditions for the current team to lift its output, develop new skills, learn some new ways of leading, particularly around working more flexibly, and use inclusion to solve a real problem that the business had, not to position inclusion as the problem, because the HR colleagues in the business had positioned the inclusion work as the thing. You've got to go and do this extra thing. The business leader was not happy about that. I don't want to do that extra thing. I've got to worry about this other thing. So we've joined them together. So that's a good example. Another one, if I may, and I think many of, if there's, I think there's some DEI colleagues on the call today from DEI World. Hello, I've got a whole list of names that I saw registered. Hello, all of you. I would say stop confusing activity with impact. And the most common pattern I see is that leaders who are doing very visible things, so doing a panel discussion or signing a pledge or launching a resource group, and thinking that's kind of enough. It's very symbolic, but it's generally not enough. And these are good people with good intentions. They want to do the right thing. But if you're not actually designing, if you're just doing activity and not using it to design process change, you're not going to change much that's going on in your organization. And that's working. You've got to work inside the system rather than work around the system.
Yeah, I was talking to someone the other day, and he was saying, people that if you send out a survey or whatever, it's because you can measure it. You're not thinking about the outcome or result. It's just that you can show the results and say 97% of this filled this survey in or whatever. It's just extra. Mm-hmm. It's just extra stuff that you can say, sure, 90% filled it in, but what will work? What outcome do you want? And do you kind of come at how do you come at your process for what you're doing with your clients in that regard?
Well, it's the same thing, really. Like, I remember having quite I won't say an argument because that sounds combative, quite a robust discussion with someone, a representative inside a client once, who was working on the ESG work, and they were very clear that the most important indicator that we could make publicly available around the diversity work was how many people had done unconscious bias training in the organization.
Yeah,
so I almost lost my mind, because it's nice. It's nice if people want to do unconscious bias training. I think many places have kind of moved on from it now, but it's that's something that you can count. You can count that if you want to. But again, what is the difference that we're trying to make? What is the experience? What is the thing that we're trying to change about people's experience, and how are we going to measure what that looks like? There's a whole bunch of stuff we could say about the measures and indicators that we can use, and I think we're going to do that shortly. But I think the worst thing you can do is just count stuff with no particular eye on the impact of what's being done. I think actually an example of this. For some years, I worked with the Champions of Change Coalition on a report which they still produce called the Impact Report. The clue is in the name. The champs are all about taking action, listening, learning, and leading with action. And they were very public. They continue to be very public about the results of the actions that they're taking. And they draw a very clear line between we're doing these things inside the organization, and that is because we want to achieve these results. And I now interestingly, when you notice something once and then you see it everywhere, I now notice lots of other similar organizations are doing reports around impact because they want to be able to show what difference they're making.
Yeah, well, it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? But I guess it can take people out of their comfort zone if they're just recording a survey results rather than and then having to do something that's actually measured on impact. Like, it takes a bit more, doesn't it, from people?
Well, yes, and it's a change that we're seeing here in Australia with the upcoming Workplace Gender Equality Agency target requirements. So for years and years, we've all sent our numbers into WGEA every year. This is how it looks. This is how many men and women we have, etc. But no real measure or interest in the change that's happening. Never any measure in any of that. However, now, after the 31st of May, you've got 3 years to show that you're making progress towards a set of targets that you yourself choose. So that is going to be very interesting. I mean, what I think would be more interesting would be if we could look at dimensions of diversity beyond binary gender and see how these things are connected. There was something the other day where the Human Resources Institute in Australia came out to tell us that disability discrimination was happening in recruitment processes. What a surprise that was to hear. Not really. And what would we do about measuring that? I wonder if maybe we could get WGEA or a similar agency to focus there. Anyway, I'm digressing. I'm going off topic.
Oh, I know, and we are. I don't even know where we are, but I know where we are in the sense of what I wanted to. Where I wanted to take you after that was I was going to bring up this at the end, but I feel like we've kind of wandered there now. Is that you've turned into a tech man yourself, aren't you? In these to help companies with the WGEA targets. You obviously saw the problem and were like, well, I think the world needs what you've kind of created.
The world needs more tech. I will talk briefly. I'll do a little ad for my thing. So everybody wants some more tech. I like an analog life, actually, but I also appreciate the need for technology. And what I'm doing is blending my deep expertise with the speed of technology to help organizations set their WGEA targets. So, look, there's a web address on the bottom of the screen to tell you where to go to look for more information about this. We'll help you set the targets. We will analyze all of your data and produce some implementation plans to help you achieve progress towards those targets. Get in touch. Is that what I should say? Yeah, get in touch. I've also added something. To this just in the last little while, where now we can, if you want to close or reduce your pay equity gap, which of course these are the gaps that are being publicly disclosed by WGEA every year now, which is wonderful. We can help you determine very quickly the changes that you need to make in terms of men's and women's representation in the pay quartiles to achieve certain reductions in the pay gap. So literally any more people of any gender you need in each quartile. So I'm excited about that because it is a very, again, it's an important measure of an important thing you can do to have impact.
Well, that's great. And congratulations on delving into the world of tech. Who knows?
It's fun. It's fun. I like this. I like it.
Keep iterating. Well, so what should we hit on? Should we hit on a hybrid work, or what should leaders measure if they want inclusion to be real? Where do you want to start?
Let's talk. What about power?
Let's talk about power. Let's go. Yes. In a healthy team, what does power look like in practice then?
Yeah. So, I mean, power is so interesting because it exists everywhere. There's power in every relationship, in every sort of setup. And I mean, we'll talk about hybrid and flex, but hybrid and flex themselves are about power. Return to office is about power. The enablement of flexible work is about how power is shared and used in organizations. In strong teams, power is very visible, and it's distributed and it's purposeful. So it supports performance rather than protecting status, right? So it actually supports productivity and performance rather than protecting status. And so in good teams, what you see is that decision rights are very clear and transparent, and people know who decides, who contributes, what my role is, how my input's going to be used. And when that is the case, meetings move more quickly because people understand where the authority is and what their role is. That's a good thing for productivity and performance. In
kind of
places where
silence before, is that kind of what is one of the things that happens once that's kind of out of whack?
Yes, yeah. So if you're doing this well, you create permission to challenge. So disagreement is actually seen as good data, and people will actively say things like, what are we missing here? Or who has the strongest view? Or let's test what this person said over here, If that permission to challenge, that the value placed on dissent is not clear, what we'll see is that people, will clam up. And, depending on what the power looks like, you may feel very disempowered in a conversation where actually your uniqueness can bring great value to the conversation. In good places, we've got information flowing quickly. We've got wins being shared and mistakes being owned. So credit and accountability side by side with each other. That's really good. And I think work allocation is transparent. So we get leaders being very, very highly visible about opportunities that are available and stretch assignments that are on the table and available for people to step up for. The safety piece is important, as you've said. So what you end up with when you've got power used well or used and shared well is faster decisions, better risk detection because we're looking around, scanning for all the views, actually more discretionary effort, which again is one of the links that Catalyst makes between inclusion and performance. More discretionary effort, which means people are going to give you more. They won't be checking out. And so power is really a multiplier of performance rather than something, as I said before, that squashes it or protects status and stops good things from happening.
Well, yeah, when we, chat to executives that might want to use Wiser, obviously inclusive leaders, they get it immediately. And those that are most resistant seem to feel like that they have to make all the decisions themselves, and that's a sign of good leadership rather than...
Yeah.
So I think they get stuck in this, I don't know whether it's old school thinking or what thinking it is, but they feel to be a good leader, they have to behave in this way.
Yeah, it's sort of an outdated sort of boss mindset with all of the imperious responsibility and control almost of all the things. And actually, the people at the top of the tree are generally not the ones who are closest to the issue or closest to the problem. And so expertise is sort of expertise proximity, which is the problem to me in my workplace today with the thing that I'm doing, I've actually got a pretty good idea of how we might be able to solve it. But if you're not going to listen to me, if there's no avenue for me to contribute any ideas about this, it's quite likely the decision is going to be made way up the tree by someone who's got no idea about what's happening down here, or out here, I should say. That's, happens all the time. You talked about silence. So I think power creates silence when there's a lack of psychological safety, which again, one of the key elements of inclusion. And the signals of this they're really in plain sight. You can see them quite clearly. So one of them is premature consensus. So if a team reaches agreement like very quickly, especially on something that's quite complex, that's often not alignment. It's actually more like conflict avoidance. Like, we don't want to have an argument about this, so we'll just agree, because people learn that it's costly to disagree, and so they just go straight to yes. Leaders should watch for that. So the speed and uniformity of agreement. If a CEO is only ever hearing yes, then I think there's a problem. That's kind of an issue. They should be creating conditions where people are happy to say no. I think that another thing to notice is like who speaks after the leader. So if you're having a meeting where the leader shares their view and says this is the story or the problem or the opportunity that we have, I think it's important to watch who speaks after and what they say. So if people are piling on with, oh yes, that sounds great, what a great idea, without adding any really valuable nuance or any pushback, so that the power dynamics there are really producing conformity again, and not genuine collaboration where we're getting all the value of those unique and different perspectives. There's another couple. So post-meeting debriefs. So I think we all do this. You sort of decompress after the meeting, and that's when we're telling each other what we actually think. All the things that we didn't say in the conversation. It's really a signal that the meeting itself wasn't safe enough for there to be honesty and openness in the discussion. And again, a loss of the contributions of the valuable diversity that's in the room. The informal conversation, though, is where the real information lives, and that's of course a power issue, because the power should live when the collective is together and everyone's got capacity to share everything that they can bring. And the final one, and this is really an equity point, just sort of disproportionate silence from particular groups of people. So if certain people consistently don't speak, and those people share demographic characteristics or lower positional power in an organization, it's not personality. It's actually a structural signal that there's something wrong with whether or not the environment is actually working well for that group of people in the way that it is working for other people. Which is why power is so interesting, right? Because some people are winning because of the power, and they quite like it. They quite like that because it works for them. But it means we're not getting the best out of everybody. In the group.
For sure. Well, I think, when we're looking at decision science, we're looking at those biases that get in the way, and I think they're the exact same thing. Social bias, who gets listened to, your information bias, what information's presented, and then the capacity bit you were talking about. Once they can't handle it, it just, they go to the simplest, oversimplify and default to the familiar. And all these things lead to lack of creativity and, blind spots and poor evidence use. It must just compile. You must just see it compile and compile.
Yes. And if I may, it's another, it's a reason that Tennille Halliday and I got together to produce Power Play. I'm going to do another little ad.
Oh, I love it. I don't even know what. I'll put a banner up.
Power Play.
Power Play.
It's
is it powerplay.com.au? What is it?
No. You can look at troyroderick.com and see Power Play. This is a forum theatre based program. Tennille Halliday is one of Australia's leading practitioners in forum theatre, and we've partnered with Tennille Halliday and partners to deliver Power Play, which first of all analyses what's going on in an organisation around power, then uses forum theatre to explore the opportunities to change that. And then the third step is to actually do the anchoring of new behaviours inside the organisation. And I don't know, I think I'm just sort of a frustrated, never quite made it to stage theatre kid. So, I love that we're using forum theatre in this way, because real actors, scenarios based on the organisation, very fun. Have a look.
And you can see it live in the sense that there's nowhere you hide if somebody's acting it out for you, is there? Isn't it? You know,
Well, that's right.
there's
It's
a
right in the room, right in the room,
yeah,
right in front of you. You know,
yeah.
one of those things that's still analog, which is very nice, as I said before.
There you are. I'll have AI bots in there in no time. So what do we look like with flexible work? What does inclusion look like in flexible work?
So isn't it interesting? I mean, it's what, 11 years since we did all roles flex at Telstra, which I still talk about a lot. Making every job flexible in a time when flexibility was really just for, mums returning from parental leave. And all the policies are there, but we really couldn't kind of mainstream flexible work. Of course, in the middle of that period, around 2020, we got COVID, and we all learned really quickly and really easily how it was to work flexibly. So inclusion for hybrid for me means valuing uniqueness again, and the needs that people have to work differently to achieve their best results or to do their best work. So work happens in teams for most people, and so this means making ways of working for individuals and the people they work with. So it's a bit of a mix in how we would want to do that. I also start when I'm thinking about inclusion and hybrid with the assumption that people come to work to do a good job, and that with good intent. I think that that's not naive, or maybe it is. Maybe it is naive, but it does mean that we can make performance the first principle of flexible working, right? So hybrid as a term, we used to talk about work-life balance 1,000 years ago. That used to be what you talked about. Then we talked about flex, where we mainly meant part-time work or a bit of time off. Time away from the office. And then hybrid kind of happened because we had to work out a way to describe working when location was flexible, as return to office practices came in post COVID. So a mix of the office or somewhere else. Recognizing, of course, that there are lots of jobs that are location dependent. So we're really framing this hybrid conversation, or this work at home description or discussion, in terms of people who are lucky enough to have work and lucky enough to have homes that are also places where this work can happen. And that's obviously not everybody. So we're talking about inclusion in hybrid. We're talking about the principle that proximity must not determine influence or contribution.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And so if you've got a hybrid environment where the people in the office get all the informal access, right? So the corridor conversations, spontaneous, like, let's go in this room and whiteboard. Oh, I just went off screen. Whiteboard something. Those moments actually build relationships and surface good opportunities, right? And if you're not in the room, you get excluded from that. So inclusion when you're designing hybrid work means deliberately designing for equivalence of access, really, to information, relationships, and to decision making being visible. And so, you don't make decisions independently of the people who are outside. We have to do meeting facilitation in a way that actively draws people in, those who are on screen. I've seen some practice where, even if 8 of us are in the office and one person is remote, we'll all go into the conference room, but we'll all be on screen on our own computer in the conference room. Because otherwise that one person is sort of, pixelated at the end of the room.
I know it does. I've been in many rooms once.
All right. Let's see, 3 design principles maybe. I said before that I really think performance is the most important design principle for flex and hybrid, and that is showing to be true everywhere I use these things. Most people think it's about things like balance or trust, and it is those things too, but performance is is really number one. Creating conditions that enable people to do their best work. And that's, that's a complex kind of undertaking, but very rarely called out as a key thing. Flexibility or hybrid is sort of still seen as some sort of special privilege or special idea that only a few people get. So if we can frame our discussion or our practice of flex and hybrid around performance, then that is a great place to start. The other principle, in addition to trust and enablement and balance, still very important, I would add hyper communication. So finding all the ways to stay connected and to communicate with each other. And connection can look very different for different jobs and different teams. Some teams that I work with, they don't actually have an office that they can come together in. They're all working in different places, but they do make a specific effort to remain in hyper communication with each other, asynchronous working online, I should say, and a commitment to actually connect as a team in whatever rhythm or pattern works for them. That's super important. I led a team when I was at Telstra, and none of us were in the same place as each other. We were all in different places, and one of our key principles was hyper communication, basically staying in touch with each other and checking in as often as we can. I think there's another one, which is another couple, which are useful practices more so than principles. So separating the synchronous from the asynchronous very intentionally. Yeah. So not everything needs to be a meeting, right? We don't need to have a meeting about everything. So inclusion will break down because organizations can be meeting heavy and they can be heavy on meetings and poor on asynchronous communication. So creating a great culture where we know how to sync. So keeping documentation real, real channels for input. Again, this hyper communication idea means that people who have other things to do in their lives, or might be in different time zones, or who think better in writing than they do turning up and having to be in a meeting, or sometimes the technology doesn't work and we can't hear each other or whatever, they can participate more fully. And finally, I think making the informal very explicit. Now, we've had to get very clear about how we enable hybrid teams to get or to create what in-person teams kind of get accidentally. And that's, again, the informal touch points, the visible recognition, mentoring and support. So on Zoom or in Teams, it doesn't happen by accident. It has to be designed that way. So we've got to make those informal things happen by design.
Yeah,
leaders who don't do that find that their remote people will quietly disengage, and they'll actually decide that that's a motivation problem when it's actually a belonging or a systems problem instead. And I thought I heard you say something.
They're really great tips. Well, I've moved off my microphone onto the thing, so you should be able to hear me now.
This is magical. I love it.
And once we edit it out, it never will have happened, so don't even worry about it.
I just think about the people who are here today.
I know. Sorry to those people.
The lovely people who have taken their morning. Anyway,
imagine Kathy Freeman when the thing wouldn't go up and everyone's screaming in her ear. You remember when the
I do remember that
on live TV. Yes. Oh, I know some people that were in the director's room and it was like full meltdown mode. So we're fine on LinkedIn Live. All right, so
the meltdown.
Let's get into, because they were really great practical tips. What should leaders measure if they want inclusion to be real? Like what should we be measuring?
With what we should all measure. First, impact on business objectives. Start with what the business is trying to do as a business. So is it trying to sell more of X to Y group of people? Is it trying to produce great policy advice? Is it trying to serve, a particular product in a new way? Whatever that objective is what we should be measuring, the contribution of diversity and inclusion. Then we can do the other things. We can measure representation of different groups. because we've got to understand what the diversity looks like and who's missing. And then we've got to measure people experience. So whether or not the diverse people are having a good time, because if they're not having a good time, they're not going to contribute to the performance and productivity of your organization. So measuring, so they're the three kind of broad buckets, really. The first one is harder, of course. I remember talking with a cement company, concrete, they're different things. Anyway, something like cement or concrete, last year, and left them with the challenge. You've really got to work out how being more diverse in your industry is going to help you produce and sell, your product better. What is the difference that it's going to make? Because otherwise we're really just doing stuff on the edges. Measuring what so that's the business stuff. In terms of the people experience, we've got to measure what changes behavior. So most organizations measure inputs, like we talked about, unconscious bias training rates, or representation numbers at a single point in time, or what the overall engagement score is, sort of aggregated to the point of complete irrelevance. Really. So none of those actually tell you if inclusion is happening in the day-to-day experience of people. So better measures include asking whether decisions are different. So looking at whether or not we're making different decisions in terms of recruitment and pipelining and how we're paying people, all of those things. Asking people specifically about whether or not they feel safe raising concerns without fear of consequences. So that's measuring psychological safety. Ironically, you'd have to have an environment of safety for people to answer that question honestly. And so the result is going to tell you one thing or the other. And I think the other thing that organizations do a lot, but it feels like a bit of a kind of looking at the wrong thing, is defaulting to exit data. Far more people are staying in your organization. So presumably, we should ask why people are staying and build on the strengths of that, rather than why people have left, because they're gone. I mean, not that we don't care why they went. It's interesting. We need to care. But there seems to be this disproportionate focus on, why did they leave? What happened? Meanwhile, 95% of the people are still here, and you've got an example of what you're doing well. You've got lots of examples of what you're doing well, and you can build on. They might also have some things to tell you about what you could do better as well before they go.
No doubt.
So the question that we sort of start with is, like, if inclusion was genuinely improving in this organization, what would be measurably different in 12 months' time? And then we just work back from that.
Yeah, that's
the question that not a lot of leaders get asked, because really we're just usually worried about counting different groups of people or, that sort of stuff.
Whereas the outcomes of inclusion are real. So why wouldn't you be trying to measure what an outcome? It'll only get better if you can measure that rather than numbers. You're so right. Yeah. Well, this is one of my favorite questions for you. What's a practical example of inclusion initiative that looked good externally but didn't change performance internally?
Oh goodness. So let's see. I've got a little example, like a program example, but to this example, I would also add internal events, external brand activations that aren't connected to commercial outcomes, and dare I say, rainbow lanyards. Sorry for those places who think rainbow lanyards are good. They kind of are, but I don't know what difference they make. And I'm in the rainbow group. So I want to tell you about a gender equity initiative that I observed recently, fairly closely, because it had all the things. Like, it's like senior sponsorship, very good budget, right? External recognition. People thought this program was really great. Genuinely held up as a model of good program. It was a women's leadership program. I mean, we could just have a leadership program, but anyway, this particular one was for women. It was a whole year. You sort of stayed in the cohort, executive mentors, lots of, as I said, real money spent on this. And the outcomes were that the people who did the program had a good time, and they felt more confident, better networked, genuinely developed, ready to do the things, feeling good, coming back to the workplace after all of their experiences on the program. But in the organisation, when they came back into it, or as they were back in it, the same process around performance reviews, the same panels around promotion, the same culture, sort of long work hours culture, and being visible was sort of the official or the unofficial measure of seriousness. So the same meetings also where the most senior voice was still effectively the one that closed discussion before anyone else had anything to say. So you spend all this great investment and time and money on helping people build their skills and feel better about being in the organisation, but you don't do anything about changing the organisation that they're part of. And within 2 years of that program finishing, most of the women who'd completed it had either plateaued or left the organisation.
Wow,
so that's a big productivity cost, because you've marked the program as a success. Oh, we did the program, great, all these people very happy. Over here, attrition or the exit of the proportion of women who'd left or plateaued measured also, but no one ever connected the two things via the dynamic in the middle, which was the system didn't get any better, so the organisation didn't change. And so that's really a central productivity failure for the DI investment, or the investment in the program. When we develop the people and don't redesign the environment, we usually just get another program. No, we should realise that there's something going wrong with developing people and not fixing the place. So good question to ask is, does this change a process, or does it just change a person, right? Does it actually change practice and process inside the organisation, or are we just fixing people? So I would suggest rethink the programs and focus on the practices as a better approach.
You fix the people so they can go and be better somewhere else. Because
well, maybe, and what a waste! It's a waste of money, waste of time, terrible loss for you. Indeed, it's a bit like sponsorship. So sponsorship is a very, very valuable thing to be doing. Leaders should always be looking to sponsor people who aren't like them into broader experiences, more exposure inside the organisation, all of those things. But we tend to do sponsorship in terms of programs, and so a few lucky people get to be sponsored, and that's really nice for them. Meanwhile, we haven't done anything to build the capability of leaders in the practice of sponsorship, and we already know that they know how to do it, because mostly they sponsor their mates quite separately from a program. It's how we got here, as a sponsorship of mates, right? So if we could build the practice of sponsorship to be a core leadership capability inside organizations and measure it, like, who are you sponsoring this month? What's happening as a result of that? What's their next move? You'd see things change very differently. Instead, you'd see things change, rather than just kind of going, oh, I wonder why Tom's best friend is the person that he's selected for this thing. I was on a call last night, actually, a town hall call, and the CEO said of someone who had been elevated to a position, oh yes, I've known so-and-so forever, for a long time. I'm like, well, this is how it works. It's just the mates, still just the mates.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon, but
well, this is the power thing. It's power.
Yep.
and understanding the difference that we can make if we shift inclusion.
True. Well, we've got to wrap up in a moment. I've got one more for you. What's the one move a leader can make this quarter that measurably improves both inclusion and performance? What have you got for us?
I thought about this, and I don't like being asked just one thing, but I have come up with just one thing. And so like, if you think about the commercials, and for the people on this call who are watching this live recording, I don't need to go through all of the great data from McKinsey and BCG and all those people who tell us about the great value of companies with more diverse management teams and better innovation, or more companies in the top quartile for gender diversity and generating above average profits, all of that stuff, all of that good research, or the WGEA research that shows a causal link between women in leadership and commercial results, which is a wonderful gift from WGEA to all of us. We know all of those things, but I would, and so starting with the commercials, here is the move, right? So here's the move. Audit your last 5 significant commercial decisions. So whether it was a product launch or a campaign or the redesign of a service or a market entry or a pitch to a client or something, and ask the one question about each of these 5 things. Whose perspectives were in the room when that decision was made? That's a question to ask. Not who was technically invited, but who actually shaped the decision. And then write that down on your pad, or if you're like me, you've got a pad. What you'll find almost certainly happened is that there's a consistent pattern about who influences your most consequential commercial decisions. And that pattern will tell you exactly where you're leaving revenue, efficiency, and customer insight right on the table. So, I mean, and that's the risk or the loss. So then change the composition of the next decision before it happens. There's some other great research that shows that inclusive teams make better decisions 87% of the time or something, and made them twice as fast with half as many meetings. Remember what we said before about too many meetings? And that is about speed and quality of execution, because inclusion is happening. So the reason most leaders don't make this move isn't that they disagree with the data or they don't want to do the diversity thing. It's that they audit the financials, they do the pipeline, they do the customer satisfaction stuff, but they never actually look at the decision-making processes that produce all of the numbers. And because that's an invisible process, it doesn't get looked at or improved. So if we make the process of decision-making 5 decisions, look at the last 5 decisions and ask that one question, we make it very visible this quarter, and then measure what's different next time, that is the move. That is the move that we can do.
I love it. And I didn't even prompt this from you, but that obviously plays straight into Wiser that can do that live.
Well, I thought it made sense. I thought it made sense to kind of go,
it does.
This connection between
Let's
one and the
come
other.
together at the end. Decision science all around. I love it.
Yeah.
Indeed. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Troy, for joining us. I think we've got some really practical tips in there, about principles and also what you can do. And inclusion isn't additional work. It is work that removes drag, fewer misunderstandings, faster alignment, clearer ownership, better follow through. So I'd encourage you to go and visit Troy's website and look at all the great work he's doing, because he's got so many things. And please share this with a leader that, I don't know how you want to share it, subtly tell them they need it or tell them they might like it, but that would be great. And thank you for joining us today. We'll be editing out the problems so they never happened. And Troy, thank you so much for your time. It was great to hear from you.